Good morning, and thank you for joining us in person or online this morning for this panel session as part of the University of Sydney Circular Economy Conference. I'd like to thank Ali Abbas for inviting us to have this panel today. My name's Rebecca Hicks. I'm the Manager of Sustainability and Circular Economy at the Regional Growth and Development Corporation, and I'm the moderator today. And we've got a really amazing panel of people who we're going to be talking about transition in precincts, and we're talking about transition to circular economy and net zero, but also the piece about, transition to taking those full advantages of operating as a precinct and what that presents for businesses in those areas. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Gadigal land, so we're on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and any Aboriginal people who are present here today. We're on land where sovereignty was never ceded, and often when we talk about what we're about to talk about today, the shorthand is to talk about this as being a move away from business as usual. But these are not actually new ideas, they're old ideas in a new context, and there's a lot to be learned and recognised in that wisdom that already exists and was demonstrated on these lands for thousands of years. So thank you. So basically, I'll just sort of introduce ourselves and a bit about what we do and how this panel comes together as a whole. And then I'll let these guys also introduce themselves more specifically. But the Regional Growth and Development Corporation is who we work for, and they're part of the New South Wales Government. And we are responsible for delivering the six special activation precincts across regional New South Wales. So those precincts that are in delivery are in Moree, Parkes, Wagga and Snowy. And we'll be focusing more on the Parkes and Wagga precincts today. And these precincts are about economic transformation in the regions. They're about jobs and investment and growth in the regions. That is also a positive contribution to communities, the environment and the social fabric of those spaces. So, why would you set up in one of our precincts? There's some key themes that apply across all of them, whilst they've all got their own particular comparative advantage and reasons for existing, and like your children or siblings, you love them all for different reasons. There's a kind of consistent theme across in terms of they offer streamlined planning. So operators can set up in our precincts and have a streamlined pathway in terms of their planning and also environmental licensing and regulation processes. We also provide a wraparound concierge service. So that supports investors from the very beginning as they move into the precinct, they set up and into their operations. Also, the master planning is a critical piece. So these precincts have been established with the intent of enabling those industries of the future. So resource recovery, advanced manufacturing, value-add agribusiness, and also renewable energy. So the master planning has been set up to enable those industries. And finally, and somewhat biased given the team I work in, but what puts the special in special activation is the environmental commitments that are also embedded in the master planning. So the master plan makes the commitment to circular economy, net zero, and alignment with the UNIDO Eco-Industrial Park framework, which essentially is a beyond compliance framework. So businesses operating in the precincts commit to above bare minimum compliance and also ongoing continuous improvement. And that's that point of distinction for these precincts. And in terms of that generational impact, like this is about jobs and growth in the regions, but it's also about jobs and growth that was future-proofed well into the future for, the challenges that they're not emerging, they're here, and that industry needs to deal with today. So we want to attract the future-proofed industries that bring high investment and quality jobs, because businesses in this space are innovators, they're doing things differently, they're investing in their processes and new ways of doing things. And also, as a whole, this is more of a resilient impact on our communities in terms of the jobs, in terms of the ability to weather the storms that are on the horizon, and also the environmental impact in the regions. So we have a great panel today of people who are not just passionate about circular economy, but actually living and breathing and doing circular economy. So we've got Azaria Dobson. She's the Director of Sustainability, Concierge and Partnerships at the Regional Growth and Development Corporation, my boss. And she has been with the program from the very beginning. So she is not only extremely passionate, but also very knowledgeable about what we're trying to achieve. We've got Cam Bain. He is from E360. He is one of our new investors in the Parks precinct, and in a matter of months should be operating in Parks. E360 is an e-waste recycling business, and your example sort of demonstrates that comparative advantage for Parks in that you could have set up across Australia operations in each state, but being on that inland rail junction, you're able to create one large operation and use that as a point of aggregation for those stocks coming in. We've also got Rebecca Hardy from Energy. She's from one of our anchor tenants in the Wagga precinct. Energy recycle over 60% of the battery stock sold in Australia. That's 65,000 lead batteries a year. And your company is part of a broader assemblage of corporations that have that full circularity with recycling batteries that they sell to the market. In particular, I'd like to thank both you and Cam for attending today, taking time out of your schedules. There's obviously a lot going on in the regions in Wagga, in floods, and Cam's been describing literally setting up a new operation in Sydney yesterday. So it is really appreciated that you are giving us your time. And finally, we have Javier Leal from the CSIRO. So where he comes into the mix is we are working with the CSIRO on the governance challenges at precincts. So, the opportunities that are to be leveraged within precincts come from that joined up thinking, the collaboration, but how do you make that work once you have precincts with hundreds of businesses, let alone when we're talking about sustainability issues, which are complex. It has different priorities, different impacts on tenants, depending on whether you might be looking at particular material efficiencies, energy demands, emissions trajectories. So thank you all for joining us today. If you could give them a warm welcome, and online, I'm sure you're welcoming them as well. But before we kick off with the questions, I'd just let you give a bit more of a detailed introduction of yourselves and why circularity is key to your work.
I think you said it all for me. I think we've set up a program, and like you said, I have been here from the start, and the idea was to do something special. And I think I've heard people refer to circular economy folk as circular economy nerds. So I'm happily a circular economy nerd, really interested in industrial ecology. And I think what you talked about before is really the key to why we're in regions, is we want to leave a positive legacy for the whole of regional New South Wales. And I think, this program is going to achieve that, not right now, but definitely into the future.
You'll need to pass. Yeah, it's a sharing situation. Yeah.
All right. Hi, my name is Cam Bain. I'm the Group CEO of E360. As Rebecca said before, we focus purely on e-waste recycling. We're a technology company, which is, we purposely talk about that because that's what we focus on, is technology to be able to process e-waste down to a commodity, to a point where we can get the purity and the cleanliness of that commodity to put back into recycling. That's exactly what we do. So from a circular economy point of view, that is absolutely our motto, is to get it as clean, to put it back into the circular economy, which is what we're all about. We're currently building 4 sites, so it's a little bit busy coming up to Christmas. We've developed an end-to-end process all the way from collection of e-waste through to refining. So we have a metallurgy team that do refining, a whole bunch of other very cool things within our business. So we looked at businesses all around the world. We traveled all around the place looking at, what do we want to be? Who do we want to be? What's world's best practice? And we came back and we decided that it sort of changed our whole strategy to say, well, let's do the whole collection point. There's lots of companies that do little bits and pieces, but we decided that we wanted to be able to take it from someone's house, fundamentally, all the way to a bit of copper or a bit of silver or gold or palladium, whatever it is, to go back into manufacturing. And that's what we're setting up. We've got a very cool pyrolysis system that we've developed in conjunction with another company out of New Zealand. That's been a piece of work that's been going for about 4 years now. It's down in Parks, ready to go. So as Aria was asking when we're going to deploy it, it'll be in the next couple of weeks we're starting. So we're getting to a point where it's very exciting. Just a bit of background on the e-waste challenge. It's one of the biggest waste issues globally, and it's growing. We all love iPhones. We all love laptops. We all love stuff to, play with. And when you think about, just look around this room and the amount of e-waste in this room, it's no one really thinks about the volume of it. It's huge. Globally, as a global community, we generate around about 55 million tons of e-waste. The issue is that we only recycle effectively 15% of that. So 40 million tons of e-waste will either go into the ground or into an e-waste landfill into an emerging country, which causes a whole bunch of other issues from a humanitarian point of view, from an environmental point of view. So that's what gets us out of bed every day, is to ensure that we can collect as much of that. We can't solve the world, obviously, but we can offer up a great service in Australia and treat Australia's e-waste really, really well and put that back into the circular economy. And our marketing people just came up with a beauty last week, I think. We want to turn the finite into the infinite. So the whole circular economy, making sure that we can keep, copper and gold and silver, just keep turning it around rather than putting it in the ground.
Well, hi, everybody. I mean, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Javier. I'm leading the Innovation Hubs unit in CSIRO, which is part of a broader team, business development and global in the organization. So essentially, our key activity is about putting together ecosystems, putting together innovation architectures for pragmatic frameworks for collaboration across multiple disciplines, multiple markets. I've been working in the innovation space for 15, 16 years now. My interest has always been developing new business models and looking at cooperative frameworks to accelerate technology adoption, technology generation, and knowledge share. I'm not an expert in circular economy, so my trade or net zero, my business expertise lies in transport, besides the transversal innovation trade. But I did had at very early stages in my career was part of a startup in Spain, in Barcelona. We thought we were going to change the world of the renewable heating and cooling sector. We didn't make it that far. I mean, but fair to say, we suffered from a big change in regulation in Spain that shocked the whole space. So I do have a bit of emotional attachment to the renewable energies and overall the sustainable development economy sector. Look, from our perspective, from a CSRO perspective, our work in precincts is about trying to connect the dots or supporting the organizations that are part of those precincts, connect the dots around maximizing the synergies, thinking broader than the individual business value proposition towards a more network approach. And this is easier said than done. We apply that obviously through design of innovation design or service delivery programs, but also at a more basic level at networking basics, connecting companies, connecting actors in precincts and with the broader ecosystem. So that's where we come into the equation. Plus the fact that CSIRO has recently launched towards net zero mission. I can talk about this later on, which is aimed to be the key instrument also articulating the ecosystem across Australia in this sector. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
And I think to your point as well, though, that there is no one person who knows all of this. It's about bringing together a range of people working with CSIRO, like we're leaning into towards net zero mission, the plastics mission, and your innovation space, because there is not someone who's done this in eco-industrial parks. Rebecca?
My name's Rebecca Hardy. I'm the General Manager at Energy Power Storage Recycling. So we're based in Wagga Wagga in New South Wales. So our business is about recycling, and it's recycling hazardous waste too, which obviously opens another set of regulatory doors. So we recycle used lead acid batteries. So we collect them from all over Australia, and as Rebecca said, we recycle approximately 60 to 65% of the Australian market. So it's around 60 to 65,000 tonne of used lead acid batteries every year. So we don't recycle lithium or NiCad batteries, only batteries that contain lead, and we refine them and produce lead ingots technically. And those lead ingots then go back to our parent company in the Philippines and are manufactured back into lead acid batteries, which are then shipped back to Australia and sold through our parent company here, Supercharge, in Australia. So they own a number of wholesale and retail battery outlets, and they also collect the used batteries when they deliver new batteries. And again, we collect them, reprocess them, recycle them, and then process starts again. So true circular economy established. So we've been doing it for around 11 years here in Australia. So it's quite a mature market. And yeah, obviously has a lot of regulation and support around that to try and avoid, obviously it's illegal to put use lead acid batteries into landfill anymore. So that has actually helped support our business, that piece of legislation.
Okay, thank you. So focusing first on that kind of operational piece, you know, there's a plethora of studies out there. To pull out one, you know, PwC forecasts that it's a $650 billion market opportunity for New South Wales in terms of circular economy. And looking to the future, I mean, you'd have to live under a rock to not be aware of the energy situation we're in and the cost of energy. And that's going to remain the case, you know, for the foreseeable future towards 2026. Also, New South Wales is well underway with its plans to transition to being a renewable energy superpower by the end of the decade. So with that backdrop, looking ahead for the next 10 years, I might throw to Rebecca first. What's your company's trajectory look like in terms of that continued transition to circular economy and net zero?
So I guess, you know, in 10 years' time, I can see our company, you know, developing means to ensure that our energy use is as small as possible. So in particular, we run gas-fired furnaces. So natural gas is one of our biggest utilities, and we use significant amounts. So work has already probably started in terms of trying to find solutions that will allow us to still manufacture effectively and efficiently, but trying to maximize the potential of the utilities we use so that we can, you know, create more efficiency in our boilers as well as our furnaces, our, you know, refining kettles, trying to find new solutions for electricity generation. So investigating the use of solar and how that can help us, and actually storing energy because we operate 24/7. So we also have energy use overnight, which obviously has its own challenges, but also we operate boilers. So, you know, how do we best utilize the energy produced from those boilers to actually force back into our plant to try and reduce our electricity usage?
Cam?
Yeah, our process down in Parks is the producer of energy. So we are working with a company at the moment, very early days, just to get some sort of waste to energy scenario whereby we can generate enough power to power our own plant. Similarly with solar panels, so our Melbourne plant has solar panels being installed as we speak. We co-locate with a company down there, so we've got a whole roof full of solar. Because what we also want to be is a technology company that's also being operated in a green way. So we think from a circular economy point of view, we tick that box. But from a net we want to make sure that we're good in that place. We don't want to be burning too much gas, taking too much power. So we want to use as much green energy as we possibly can. With the precinct itself, I look forward to 10 years. And I'm using the solar farms that I'm providing maybe my hard plastics to the waste to energy plant. And that's the beauty of being down at Parks. I want you to go down the road and I can take an output from my process that might be hard to process or can't be processed through my process, but can be down the road. And that's the true circular economy. That's ultimately where we want to be, and keep working towards that. And that's why we're at Parks. So that's very good.
I think we might hold for a moment till the later part of the discussion. I think some of those energy challenges that you face and what that might look like using that kind of precinct perspective of not sort of a site-specific solution, but what might be able to be leveraged if you operate at that kind of connected precinct perspective. But Azaria, 10 years.
Oops. I like your vision of 10 years from now. I think that would be amazing. Yeah, 2 years, maybe 10 years. I think we need to acknowledge that net zero and circular economy is going to be really hard. So what we've done in the precincts is we've obviously embedded a whole lot of really lofty objectives and targets, and New South Wales Government has done the same. And, you know, we look to other jurisdictions such as the Netherlands or Denmark, or, you know, lots of very innovative countries are doing the same thing. And when you talk to those people, they all say, well, we've set the target, but we have no idea how we're going to do it. So I think what we need to do is acknowledge that the challenge is really hard, and then use our Australian ingenuity to overcome those challenges. And so when we're sort of looking at what the big challenges are going to be, obviously energy is one. Having, you know, an aligned objective and having a precinct that provides a framework and an approach for businesses like CAMS and like Rebecca's, you know, that's, I guess, how we're setting it up as a bit of a framework to say, well, hey, we all want to do the same thing. How about you come to Parks or come to Wagga or come to Moree, and we'll work out the best way to overcome challenge A, challenge B, because, you know, in the circular economy, I guess, you know, the best thing that we can do is start understanding what our challenges are, what our business models are, what the supply chains are, and then that will actually help people solve for net zero. So, you know, if you understand what your material flows are, you go, okay, well, one of my big flows is energy. So what am I going to do about addressing that? So in the precincts, like I said, apart from those, you know, very visionary objective setting, I think we can provide definitely some precinct solutions for energy. And did you want me to talk about that later? Yeah. So we can talk about that later. But I think at the, you know, I think at the very start, it is that kind of collaborative approach and setting those objectives early, and then, you know, sitting down and having those conversations.
And that's a pretty neat setup for you, Harvey. Yeah. We might keep the details of governance for a bit later, but yeah, those themes of how to catalyze that precinct opportunity. I think you'd have some opinions on that. Yeah.
Look, I think the panelists have already touched on the point that it's a complex scenario. It's more complex than I mean, it's easier said than done. Look, from a perspective of a multidisciplinary, holistic research organization like CSIRO, for us, which we also have this mission of supporting or providing positive impact to the broader Australian economy, the industrial tissue, and the society at large. For us, it's bringing that multidisciplinarity into play and somehow supporting the de-risking of the process for the actors involved in that process. Yeah, so there's a lot of interconnections in this space. It relies on many knowledge domains as well, and many moving parts, and that multidisciplinarity brings the element of supporting the definition of what Azaria was mentioning about that actionable framework where the different actors in the precincts can relate to, but also modular enough to adjust to the requirements or specific requirements of each actor. Yeah. So I will say what we can bring into the question is that connectivity to the multidisciplinarity. So what's happening in different technology spaces, in different socioeconomic levels or disciplines, but also this G-local approach, this think global but act local. That it means you need to be interconnected, as Azaria mentioned, with what's happening around the world, how people are, how other jurisdictions are operating, how different models are being implemented, what's the level of success, what are the trade-offs with those models. That's something that CSIRO can do as well with its national and international footprint. And essentially, I think the key here is the risk, the process. Yeah? So that companies that are in the precincts or companies that are actually engage into this journey, they can access the right tools, they can access the right expertise, and they have a reference framework that they can follow and can guide this process.
Neatly leads on to the next theme. You know, in this space, you often hear, you know, the discussions about radical collaboration, and that is not sort of a niche idea in, this is my alumni, you know, the political science areas of university. That was something that was raised at the recent Impact X conference by multinational corporations, energy startups, international business councils. Like the solution, to find the solutions we need at the scale and speed we need requires that kind of, radical collaboration. So it's also a theme that you hear from the Dutch circular economy experts. Professor Kramer and some of her associates from the Netherlands travelled around here in the middle of the year, and that was again one of their key messages. Might turn to you, Rosario, on your thoughts on your organisation's ability to contribute or facilitate that collaboration.
So it's almost like we planned this earlier because Javier talked about de-risking things, and that's exactly what we've tried to do with our program. So, government has come in and said, we believe in precincts. We believe in somewhere like parks. We think that this is a really great location to do business, and therefore we're going to make a large investment. So we've made a large investment in Wagga, over $150 million, $185 million in parks. So we're really trying to kind of demonstrate our belief in what we're developing. And I think that whole idea of de-risking, that location and the ideas that we're trying to put in place, that we are going to look at circular economy or industrial ecology, is about, attracting the businesses that we were trying to attract. But once you've de-risked that for a business, you can start on the platform of making people think like a precinct. So in Wagga, for example, we've got a whole lot of businesses that are pretty much, and you've been in operation for 11 years. We've only been a precinct for, maybe a couple of years, and, we haven't had all our frameworks in place just yet. So the challenge for us is to try and make people think like a precinct. I'm sure you've got people next door, Rebecca, that maybe you've never talked to in the Bowman industrial estate. Now it's a precinct. We will be wrapping a bit of a framework around to help you talk to your next door neighbours. And like Cam said, in parks, bit of a greenfield, we'll be making those connections for you. So you were talking about connecting with the plastics to fuel recycler for the plastic that you can't use, you can take it down the road. So I think our role really is, and in that radical collaboration space, is to help build trust and relationships between our precinct businesses. So, we're de-risking, we're making you think about working together and identifying opportunities. So, government's role really is in, I guess, making sure that that trust is there. Hey, government's committed, so this must actually be a thing that's going to happen. Government's put policies in place. You were talking about the policy settings earlier. So, some of the policy settings that we've put in place with streamlined planning and really pushing the circularity, we're trying to give all of the signals to the market to sort of come and set up and collaborate. And once we have decided, and I know we're going to talk about governance later, but once we've, decided the best framework from all the examples that we do have, part of having that trusted actor being the connector between people that actually are potentially in competition, I think will be the key to that collaboration. Because, if your next door neighbour is sort of in competition with you, well, maybe you don't really want to talk about your waste streams together. But if we can be kind of the middleman and sort of say, hey, here's where the commonalities exist. Not everybody has to be exactly the same as everybody else, but it's up to us to pick out those threads of commonality and be able to say, business A, you actually have a lot in common with business B over here. Yes, there might be a bit of competition, but here's how you can harness the collaboration to make a benefit for both of your businesses. So I think if we continue to play that trusted actor role, then we'll be able to create more opportunities for collaboration, circular economy, and make it work.
And I think on that point of de-risking, but also that competitive environment, Harvey, maybe did you want to talk about, what is that kind of balance or that framework that you can put in place to facilitate that?
Yeah, first I think, we need to have a bit of a reflection about the word collaboration. Yeah, I think it's because it is not a singularity for this space. It is a commonality in nowadays economy. I think, companies are moving their value proposition. They understand that the to gain competitive advantage, they need to cooperate with actors in the network. This is happening more broadly and across all sectors. In the innovation space, we have plenty of examples. We know that innovation is not the result of a single effort. This is either a very organized and concerted approach to collaboration. So when people talk about radical collaboration, I'm not sure exactly what is meant. I mean, I would like to think they're talking about systematizing collaboration, and that's where the framework or the building the right frameworks comes in. Look, I'll give you an example that might sound a bit out of place, but it's an example that we have, at least I've been quite familiar with, and it's that of setting collaborative decision-making processes in airports. Yeah? So if you look at that model, it's all about getting all the actors in the ecosystem of an airport to collaborate, to share data, to change their processes, to change their business logic towards obtaining a better gain for the system. So essentially, the context for that was 10, 15 years ago, the airspaces in Europe and US were starting to be saturated. The business model was starting to be in jeopardy because of the inflow of flights and activity in the system. What made the actors realize is that they need to cooperate, they need to exchange data, they need to exchange information, and they need to build the right platforms. And technology had a big part of it. That essentially was a big cultural change towards actors that were not communicating absolutely anything in a shared environment, needed to do that transition. Yeah, it's a model that I like to refer because what people doesn't realize about a collaborative process is that there are trade-offs. So when you enter a collaborative approach, you have to be willing to give away part of your autonomy to operate, part of your current business model, part of your way of doing things. And that's easier said than done. And there's a big cultural piece. Yeah. So if you approach the example of the airport, collaborative decision-making processes from a technology perspective is all about building data platforms, is all about building automatisms, is all about bringing automated robotic processes into place. In reality, it's much harder than that. It's about bringing all the actors together, get them to build a new business ecosystem and a new business logic with new work processes in place in order to save or to keep their business together. Yeah, and that propagates from an airport to another airport to a broader network. Yeah, so at the moment that's a model that has been adopted by 40 airports in Europe, and it's just been exported to Australia. The reason I'm mentioning it is because I'm connecting to your question. Yeah, it's all about the framework. I mean, but the issue with the framework is that you need to be able to engage with all the stakeholders from a bottom-up approach. That's something that we've learned in the innovation space, or at least that's something that we try to practice constantly in the innovation space, like have that negotiated space where actors can come, define their strategies, define their challenges, identify their barriers, identify their needs as well, and have a way up to modify or to define that framework. But yeah, I wanted to make sure that we understand with collaboration, there's trade-offs, and there's not a silver bullet. Yeah, so building the right framework that matches the needs of the context is absolutely critical. So your question?
Yeah.
I think I diverged a bit, but yeah.
No, but like that, essentially what you're talking about is that system that enables that corporate collaboration in a de-risked kind of aligned objectives context. And so throwing to you guys, maybe, so for example, with the energy challenges, if you take a kind of precinct perspective or take that circular economy perspective, solutions might involve, you know, the outputs from another operator, the heat or being used to kind of contribute to your sort of heating requirements so that you start to minimize the actual sort of energy you need to use. Just interested to understand, you know, is that the kind of interdependency that your business sort of is considering in the future or comfortable with considering as the precinct kind of matures and those opportunities present themselves?
Yeah, so I guess from energy's perspective, because we've been established for a long time in those hubs and we've watched development happen around us, you know, it's important, I think, to have those connectivities between the businesses because, you know, I 100% agree there would definitely be synergies that we could, you know, exploit, for a better word, to, you know, make our business run better and vice versa, you know,
Yeah.
give those other businesses that, you know, potentially have outputs that we could utilize and vice versa. So again, you know, that waste to energy is really important from our business perspective as well. So, you know, all our product comes in on, wooden pallets, and those wooden pallets at the moment go to landfill. Surely there is a better way to treat those wooden pallets so that they can add to the circular economy. Again, plastic waste is the same. Soft plastic, our hard plastic isn't too bad. We actually recycle our hard plastic already, but the soft plastic definitely is an issue, and would be something that we could definitely look to collaborate with, and then give them the raw materials, and then buy back from them the energy that they produce from those. So it's a win-win, really.
Yeah. So that sort of information sharing, or sort of revealing the books to then identify those opportunities makes business sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I might just jump in. I think that the strength of what's going to happen in the precincts is going to be built on successful projects like that. So, one at a time, what's the biggest, win that we can get straight away? And then on the back of those wins, then you end up saying, okay, well, that actually worked out. I had to make some trade-offs, but it wasn't too bad. Now I can move on to the next thing and the next thing. You've just got that foundation of trust that you've built on the back of those successes. So, I'm hoping that we can get there for Wagga.
And I think, Cam, so taking this collaboration piece to, working with research and innovation space, I know that you've talked about examples or initiatives where you've sort of been working in that space. So maybe if you wanted to elaborate on that.
Yeah, look, as I said before, we are very proud that we think we've got a full end-to-end solution to treat all our inputs, all outputs, but we don't profess it to be the best. So there could be, from a collaboration standpoint, there could be a better way to do it. And so we're more than open to do that. We don't think that our plant will look the same as it does today in 5 years' time. So we know we're going to have to make changes to get more effective and so forth. So we know that we have to partner with other businesses like waste to energy plants down at parks and so forth. There's better ways to do things from a cost point of view and environmental point of view. So it makes really good sense to be able to do that. I've been in this industry for about 3 years and I haven't seen any collaboration whatsoever. Everyone works very much in isolation. It's all kind of, don't tell him that, don't tell her that. And so I feel like when we were first, in fact, we'd been trying to get, we had a site in Sydney. For 12 months, we were trying to work out who to talk to, who needed what body needed this, and all these kind of things. It became so convoluted and hard to get through all the red tape, so to speak, that when we were introduced to Azaria, I put it on mute and I said to Anthony, one of the guys at work, I said, is this really happening? Because there was this bunch of people, there would have been, I think, 15 people or so on the initial call, saying we can do this for you, we can help you with jobs, we can help you with collaboration, we can help you with blah, blah, blah. And this went on and on. I'm just going, I can't believe it. So we pretty much signed up and moved our entire plant down there within a matter of months. So we absolutely are going to drive the whole collaboration piece really hard. We also want to collaborate and we'll continue to collaborate with manufacturers overseas. Europe has got some amazing ideas. We've got a fire in the building, do we?
Hopefully not. No.
And we'd like to bring some great ideas from America and Europe and so forth, because they're so much more advanced in the e-waste space than what we are. They're like 10 years ahead. It's chalk and cheese. So we'll continue to do that, and hopefully we can bring some of the global knowledge. To your point, how can we bring some of that global thinking into parks as well, and bring that into the whole collaboration piece? So it's pretty exciting.
And so basically, the key theme there is just the precincts being a attractor for like-minded businesses willing, aligned with that long-term objective. So willing to engage in that maybe less traditional way than what you're saying.
The other really big benefit is that if we need to speak to any other government body, regulation point of view, whatever, it's facilitated for us. And so you go, well, you're going to talk to them and clear that and do it. So
there's so many things for us to go down, but
So I came up with an idea with Emma, and within a week she goes, Cam, we got a call, 10 people, planners, this one, that one, about just an idea that I threw up there. So out of that has kind of now changed our strategy as well. We're going to utilize parks a lot more than what we were initially. So it's been great.
I mean, there's themes on innovation, skills, and also regulation that we could go down in the question space. So I might leave that for the questions to steer us there.
I just
Sorry,
wanted
looks
to
like
do
you
a
want to-
shout out to our wonderful concierge at Parks, Emma Ridley. Yeah, she's amazing. But also it's so good to hear that the model that we put in place is actually working in real life. And I think that's the whole challenge, is that we can have really good ideas about how a model should work, because there are so many, and then to actually see it in practice and to hear, and look, we hadn't sorted that out. That was actually just
was
off
not
the
in the
cuff.
script,
So that's
yeah.
why I'm smiling, because it's actually so good to hear when the hard work has kind of paid off and we are going to be benefiting businesses by the approach. So thanks, Kim.
So I want to leave some time for questions. So we might just have one more piece looking at, as we've discussed, the precincts are in different stages of maturity. So we've got Parks, which has half a dozen operators. It's going to grow significantly in the near future. We've got Wagga that has captured an existing industrial precinct. So we've got over 50 businesses already there. And I thought, Javier, in terms of governance in that multi-actor space, like we've kind of got two different themes here. One's about activation, one's about transition. If you wanted to kind of talk us through some of those ideas about what that looks like for a successful governance structure.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to talk about success in this space, to be honest. I mean, I can talk about lessons learned. Look, in general, I mean, I think it's a fantastic opportunity. It's a challenge, but it's a fantastic opportunity. Early stage precincts, obviously, the focus needs to be in establishing the dots, helping businesses to understand or to realize the ecosystem in which they are operating. So they tend to, or our approach, at least in CSIRO, when we are activating these spaces or supporting the activation of those spaces, is to focus on the value network analysis side of things, like making or supporting those businesses to realize the value of knowing what's happening intra-doors and in the business across your business. Yeah. With more mature precincts, obviously actors are more established. You need to start delivering added value in a rapid manner. I mean, the actors tend to be more critical. They tend to be more organized. So they expect more from both the managing authority and from their interactions within the precinct. But that's also a big opportunity in order to shape more added value services towards innovation services or supporting access to transnational markets in a more comprehensive way. Yeah? So two different spheres, I will say, with different approaches. However, big opportunities in both. Look, our lessons learned in working in this space. I've worked in precincts, clusters, parks in Europe in over 15 years' time. It's a process that needs time. Yeah? So I think the more time you devote to planning, and I think that's something that you guys are doing very well, and from my knowledge of the process, the more time you devote to planning, the better it becomes, because launching specific projects, when you get into the project arena, is when problems start to flesh out. The more prepared you have done, or the more work you've done preparing that gameplay, I mean, the better for all the actors. And then there is another issue about that structured approach. Yeah? So frameworks to support what interactions happen in the precinct, what transitions happen in the precinct, need to be context sensitive, but also need to be as modular as possible to allow those models, those approaches to evolve. Yeah? So I will say, don't rush the planning stage in either stage of maturity of the precinct. So either at activation stage or at consolidation stage, if you want to call it, and then make sure that there is a sensitive or a context sensitive framework in place. And I will also say one last thing. I mean, be aware of the technology factor. Yeah? So a lot of people think that this is all about technology, that transitions are about technology in this space, but also in innovation spaces. It is actually more about changing the mentality and the way business operate, yeah? and the way the actors interact within that ecosystem.
Azaria, in terms of our plans.
So many plans. And Javier, I like that you say that we should take time, because I feel, probably because I've been here from the start, I feel like we've taken a huge amount of time. But obviously, these things do take time and we need to do them properly. I just think that the opportunities that we've got, I want to rush to that 10-year, and I want to drive past parks and see all those things in place already. So I think that is a bit of a challenge. I think with governance, you're right, you know, like we've talked about before, there are so many frameworks, so we could pick a million different types of frameworks. I think that our role at the precinct and being government is, like I said, you know, that de-risking and putting those objectives, but I think making everyone really clear about their roles and responsibilities. So, you know, whatever structure it is, it's like, well, this is what we're expecting, but this is what the benefits will be. And I think, you know, for us, getting some of those really solid, you know, initial projects up in a framework so people can see that there is that benefit. I think we're going to run into, you know, the governance framework needs to help how we're going to manage things like data. And I know we haven't really talked about data today, but we've been talking about it a lot lately because, you know, all of these collaborative relationships are great. But if we don't have a framework that allows for that sharing of data, then we can only go so far. So it might only just be a discussion with, you know, Brightmark or, you know, whoever it is, and E360 saying, well, I've got plastic and hey, I need some plastic as well. But then you actually need to exchange the data about what types of plastic and how much and what it looks like. And when we get down to talking about industrial ecology, you know, it's much more complex. You know, we're talking about how much sodium hydrochloride do you use? You know, what are your really specific inputs? So we need a governance framework that will allow businesses to share that business to business data. So yeah, I am going to tell you specifically, you know, I've had a process engineer come in, I understand my supply chain. I'm going to share that, you know, sometimes proprietary information about what goes into my business and what comes out the other end to facilitate that collaboration at a much more detailed scale. So I think, you know, that business to business framework, how we work as a precinct as a whole. You know, there are some things like energy that we can do as a whole. Every business can participate in a microgrid, for example, or, you know, some sort of hydrogen solution if it's in Wagga, or bioenergy. But, you know, what are we going to present, you know, not only at that business scale, at the precinct scale, but then what are we going to present as a precinct out into the world? So, you know, part of the attractiveness of being able to understand our, you know, general supply chains and how we work is to then attract businesses. Love hearing about businesses coming from Sydney to coming to Parks, but, you know, maybe we work out that there's a need for a particular type of business that could service 3 of our precinct businesses. So I see, you know, if we set up the right framework, that then there can be actions at a precinct scale that we go and say, hey, we're looking for this type of business to come and service this, or even things, and we haven't talked about this yet, but, you know, things like sustainable procurement at scale. So how do we work at a precinct scale? And to do that, it is all about that trusted framework, that, you know, trusted place to put the data, and, you know, learning from our cousins in the Netherlands, you know, even they're just the most collaborative culture ever, and they've had that embedded in there for a very long time. But even they get questions about, you know, if I'm going to share my data, what are you going to do with it? And that's the sort of question that we need to be able to answer with our governance framework. You know, you're going to share this, this is how we're going to use it, and this is how we're going to use it to benefit everybody. And as a government organisation, I'm hoping that we can do that pretty effectively, but we need to have a framework that allows that and embeds that trust in the precinct.
And before we go to questions, I might ask Cam and Rebecca, so from your guys' perspective as businesses, what are those kind of elements or pieces of the puzzle that would give you comfort to be, you know, leaning into that space of
look, it's as far as giving data on our output to get a better outcome, I don't think we've got an issue with that. It's not, it won't impact my business materially. And that's all part of the collaboration, and there's non-disclosures and all that stuff. And if you're working in a true collaborative way, then there's got to be a level of trust.
Yeah.
And you got to be working towards a common goal, common output that's going to benefit both. So, will I give away my IP of how I do stuff? Probably not. But
yeah.
yeah, I hope the directors aren't watching this. But look, certainly output, for it to be usable for someone else, you have to give data. You have to tell them what it is.
Yeah.
So for it to really work, we're all got to sort of rip the band-aid off a bit and say, right, we're going to get together as a collaboration. We're going to sign NDAs and work, you know, collaboratively together towards the common good. getting better outcomes.
So yeah, I 100% agree. So we're a privately owned company, so wholly owned by our company in the Philippines, and you know, they are very protective of their, especially financial data, but outputs and, you know, trying to get that win-win situation. I don't think there would be any issues about, you know, sharing that information. That obviously, you know, we've got a waste. You need that waste, you know what I mean? I think that's, I don't see any issues with that sort of sharing of information. So, you know, it can't work unless you do. So I think it's a 100% natural progression for those sorts of businesses, you know, and understanding, you know, what our energy, you know, requirements are. You know, I think that's important for those businesses. If they're producing energy, they need to know what do they need to produce to be able to help support us. So, you know, they've got to share information just as much as we do. So I think it's important.
I think the precincts can play a big part in solving a lot of the really tough things to recycle, or things that are a massive problem that you can't make money on, that cost a lot of money to set up the plant to process it. And so it's a collaboration with government, the government funding and the precincts and stuff like that, and businesses that bring the smarts. I think there's a great opportunity there to sort of throw that out there.
Just another thing on the list.
Well, obviously we could continue this conversation for hours, but I thought we'd pause and give the opportunity for anyone in the audience to ask a question, or Greta, if there's any questions that come through online. Oh.
Thanks. My name's Meredith. Hi. I think the idea of collaboration is fantastic, and I love hearing about all of the plumbing of collaboration. So, you know, the data and the policy and the trust building and all of that kind of stuff. I guess I've heard a lot of organisations talk about how they are good and relatively experienced at bilateral relationships, and most contracts, and literally if I think about one element of plumbing, I've got contracts written down here. Contracts mostly are bilateral. Multi-stakeholder contracts are really tricky. This is a very specific point, I guess, but it's critical, and I'm just interested in any experience that you've got with that, or ways that you might be thinking about the multilateral stuff that gets into that. Some of what you're talking about, I think, would probably require as part of some of the frameworks that you're developing.
So we're not quite up to that yet, but we do have a couple of examples where we've had collaborations of businesses come together to, well, they were coming together to go for grant funding. So, you know, a mutually beneficial outcome. They were all coming together, and there was the formation of a special purpose vehicle for them to do things like sustainable procurement, because you're right, it is really hard to get autonomous individual companies to sign up to agreements. It's even hard, if I can be really honest, to get companies to sign NDAs without making changes. So, you know, NDAs are pretty simple, and we have a template in government and we send it out. And then there have been examples of where it's taken us, you know, well over a month to get both entities to agree. So I think it is going to be the big challenge, is to get more than one person to do so. And I think if we can be a little bit clever, so if it is a special purpose vehicle or something, you know, set up for a specific reason, I think the more examples we can get, and maybe Javier's got some good examples from the innovation space, we're open to you know, exploring those. And I think as government, providing that kind of anchor and trying to broker those sorts of agreements is going to be one of our biggest challenges.
Thank you. It's a great tricky question. So look, I mean, multi-stakeholder collaboration is one of the most complicated elements to sustain. Yeah, is you can relatively put multi-stakeholder collaboration in place, normally through funding schemes or incentives. Like there's a grant here, I want a consortium, apply, guys, and that provides all the legal structure, all the framework for those companies or actors to cooperate for a given goal. If you want to sustain that, then you need to go further than that action or transaction specific approach. Yeah? It's not easy. Look, I mean, we when I was working in Europe, we were working for the European Commission to review some of the big technology products that were being launched in cooperation by companies with very specific contexts. And they all realized that out of the particular cooperation of 30 companies plus 20 universities to deliver a big data platform in the port of Rotterdam, for instance, there was not real continuity on the product. So they developed all the foundational enabling technology. The technology was there, but it was not being adopted by the partners that were all even part of that consortium. Yeah. So how do you transition that transactional relationship towards a relationship that becomes more stable, is more business driven? It has to do with the value proposition. So the way we approached that process was, let all the partners understand what their role is in the network in which they are operating. Why are you based at the port of Rotterdam? What do you take out of it? So who do you interact with? Who do you need in this process? What's your value flow? So what are the inputs in the system? What are the outputs in the system for you as a particular business? Once you start visualizing that and analyzing that and measuring that, you'll realize that you cannot survive in that ecosystem without being connected to a number of dots in that ecosystem. And that's the gateway that gets you to explore further those pathways of establishing something that becomes less transactional, more partnership oriented at a multi-stakeholder level. Yeah? There's no magic wand. I mean, if you hear somebody telling you it's very easy to do, he or she won't have much experience on the field, but there are ways to do it, and there are instruments like the value network analysis tools and trying to decrypt, let's say, the value interactions of companies or actors in complex ecosystems. I have to say, coming back to that experience, we didn't manage to fully succeed, but we did pave the way for a process in which all the stakeholders realize about the value of their interactions in the ecosystem, and that was a big move. I'm not sure if looking at models also solves the situation. I think you have to be very context aware as well, and very particular about what's happening in the specific ecosystem. Yeah.
And just one other thing, I think, when you talked about that value proposition and how things kind of drop off over time, the other thing we're trying to do is, I guess, provide a bit of a rallying resource to drive this into the future. So this is not something that we're just we'll get the plumbing and then we can walk away next week. Beck's going to be here forever putting it into place, but we will have resources to continue to drive that, because I think, when people do lose the idea, like, why are we even doing this? What's in it for us? And I think if we are just there constantly saying, well, what is the value? This is what the value is, and here's how we're going to drive that. And we've put that in place to continue for quite a long time into the precinct life.
01 come.
Am I on? Can you hear me? I've got a question from our guests online. Yuling Du asked a question: how would the government encourage the organic synergy and collaborative development in the precincts? And a comment following: it would not work long term if the government has to be there playing a big brother role at all times.
Yes, I don't think we want to play a big brother role. We want to play a facilitation role. And when we talk about how we're going to set this up, and, this is all very strategic. It's like, well, what it's going to look like in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. I think we would like the frameworks that we set up to speak for themselves. So we're there, like I said, we've put a resource behind making these, getting the plumbing in place. I like that idea. Getting that in place is really, really hard. So we're spending a lot of time and energy trying to get that in place, and people won't even see that eventually. A couple of years from now, they'll go, oh, that seemed really easy. Beck and I will have grey hair, but, it'll be set up. So we're sort of trying to do the really hard yards. Let's get the things that are really essential for this collaboration to work and for the precinct to work. And, everything in precincts is hard. Building infrastructure is hard. Putting frameworks in place is hard. Getting funding is hard. It's all, quite a journey. But once we've done that and we can get those successful, first projects over the line, then what we're hoping is that what we've built actually starts speaking for itself. And I think Javier said it before, is that, if a business really understands where they fit in the precinct and how they relate to the businesses within the precinct and what is that value, and that's really obvious to them, then what happens, and we've seen this in other models, is that those businesses start taking an active role in driving that collaboration forward. And so our hope is that then we can take a bit of a backseat, because everyone else, Cam's already a fan, but, we've got all the businesses around the table going, we would be stupid to let this go by the wayside, and therefore we're going to contribute money, time, effort to keeping this going, and then we won't need to be there. But I just think that we're not there yet, and that we need to see our role continuing until we're not needed, and then we can step away and go and do something else.
Further to that, which I think is a really nice lead in, we've got a kind of comment actually from Removalist app online, and they're asking, how do we collaborate if we want to run a pilot project with you? So I think that you could talk to that, and perhaps you can connect with these people separately.
Awesome. So I did a bit of a shout out to our concierge for parks, but we actually have a concierge for all of our precincts in delivery. So depending on where you would like to set up, we have a specific person whose role it is to undertake the process that Cam talked about before. So, that person, when we can provide some contact details, their role is to sort of say, hey, they send out an NDA to start with, get that signed up really quickly. And then we understand, what the business needs, what sort of business it is, what's the tech, what sort of land, what sort of infrastructure. And then we have conversations about whether they should be coming to a precinct. So that's the other thing. We don't ever try and make someone to come to a precinct that's really not going to suit their business model. I mean, we'd love everybody to come, but it's not right for everybody. And there still needs to be some business left in Sydney, so we can't steal it all. So, we will see whether it actually does fit in a precinct. If it doesn't, then we can pass it on to another part of our precincts group, which deals with the rest of regional New South Wales. So we basically have a service set up specifically to cater for that type of a process. So they can email me.
Hi, Heidi Robertson. I was just curious about what sort of skills you need, both in the businesses that are part of the precinct and also what you might bring in from an external facilitator or something like that.
So to facilitate what we've been talking about today, or?
Yeah. I think I've heard a lot about collaboration. So I think I'm being open to collaboration. And are you planning to foster more of those skills and enable more in the business?
Yes. And I think, it's a bit of a mindset. So I don't think it's that someone's gone. I mean, I'm sure there's some great courses at University of Sydney that you can go and learn about this sort of thing. But I think it's actually about a mindset. So we might have, Cam, I'm not even sure what your background is, but I'm sure he did something interesting at uni and now he's doing something totally different to, what he started. So I think we're trying to get businesses who have that collaboration mindset. And part of what we will facilitate is, I guess, a bit of that behavioural change. So there will be, people who, I guess, it's really kind of hard to pinpoint that this person, they're great at facilitation and so they're going to come in and solve our issues. I think we need experts from a whole range of places. So we need experts in chemical engineering. We need experts in industrial ecology. We need experts in engineering and renewable energy. So I think that, the precincts are so broad, and because we touch every single industry. So we're doing everything from defence and aerospace in somewhere like Williamtown to e-waste recycling and parks, so for us, it's less about isolating the one skill and more about looking at those behaviours and people who are open to that. And I think we're also looking for people who, look, I'm an environmental scientist by trade. Not everyone is as passionate about the environment and circularity as I am, or, some of our precinct people are. I think we're looking for, people that are passionate. We're looking for people that do believe in what they're talking about, but we're also looking for the people that are just pragmatic and going, my energy costs have gone up 600%. So it's now a business decision. So I think we're actually accessing people across a broad spectrum and asking them to collaborate with us. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Is there maybe one more question? I'm mindful of time, but if we've got a couple more minutes with you guys.
Hi, I'm Hannah. We've heard a lot about collaboration, the need to kind of have a structured plumbing and really articulate that up front. Beyond governance, one question I have is around conflict, because I think with collaboration, there will naturally be conflict. So I'd be curious to know, outside of a governance framework, what can be done to manage that as and when it arrives, because I think it's inevitable. And if you have any good examples of how that's been successfully dealt with to have a good outcome.
I wish I had a lot of examples, but I think for us, there's a lot of conflict even within government. So, you know, we talk about, and I'm not having a go at our EPA cousins, but there have been lots of robust discussions about, well, we've made a whole lot of commitments over here for recycling, for example. Is the policy framework responsive to, you know, what we're trying to do? And I think that the conflict resolution part is really hard when you don't agree on what the objective is and when you're not aligned in the vision. So I wish I had a silver bullet to say every time there's going to be an argument, I'm just going to pull out this and all the arguments will stop. But I think that, you know, you touched on it before, if you can bring everyone back to, okay, well, you've just had a discussion with EPA about this policy that doesn't work, absolutely doesn't work, and it's opposite to what we're trying to do. I think, you know, tackling it head on, it never works because people are like, well, that's the way we've always done it. And it's going to stay like that because we think it works. And so I think, you know, that kind of understanding and getting them towards a shared vision and getting them out of, you know, change is hard. So for us, we've sort of been change management approaches and how we're going to introduce this in a way that's not seen as adversarial. How we're going to give really solid examples of what we could do a little bit differently. And we haven't talked about innovation sandboxing today, but, you know, if we are trying to do something a little bit different in our precincts, I really think that bringing it back to the vision and trying to, you know, not shy away from conflict, because, you know, sometimes people are coming, you know, the EPA, and like I said, I'm an environmental scientist, they just want to protect everybody. So they're coming from that as, you know, they don't want people to do things because if people do things, people get hurt or the environment gets hurt. So you've got to really understand where people are coming from and see where the common ground is. So even though everyone wants to regulate everything, we have a battery recycling problem, we have an e-waste recycling problem. So how are we going to reach a shared position between someone like the EPA and, you know, some of our companies here to get a solution? And we can't do that by being adversarial. We have to try and get people on board with a shared vision, and this is what we're trying to achieve, and, you know, trying to work together on. So I don't know if that answered your question either, because we haven't really solved it, but I think at least we're trying to do it with a bit more of an open perspective.
And I think part of what we're doing currently in the precincts is developing that circular economy strategy and that net zero roadmap. So some of that aligned objectives is articulated and clear, and keeps that kind of North Star for what people sort of sign up and willing to commit to. We have gone well over time and we could keep going, but I'll do the right thing because people have other things to do. But I did want to note, I mean, we've got people in the room I know from other working with other eco-industrial parks across Australia, the Hunter JO, which has a circular economy agenda. Ali hasn't even had the chance to speak. He's from Sydney Uni, and his efforts in terms of sandboxing and regulatory innovate, or, you know, what that innovation, navigating that space could present opportunities for conversations after this. But I thought Rebecca and Cam, in a couple of minutes, this is, you know, we're in the Sydney Knowledge Hub. It's about commercializing technology and solutions. So if there's any kind of burning platform challenge that you have that you'd love a bright technology or company or skills challenge that you wouldn't mind if you want to use for a bit of a spruik, I'll let you guys have the floor.
As I mentioned before, we're trying to solve for a whole bunch of issues that are problematic for us. So I've already got a long list of people to call after this, starting with Ellie there. So, but places like this are fantastic. We want to partner with universities, get some smart people around our challenge or our idea, and bring some different innovations and different ideas to our problems. So we all get in the room, obviously, and we think that we all come up with the right solution, but we probably don't. We can probably come up with a much better solution if we can collaborate with, with your department and so forth and university. So it's something that we did very early in the piece, dropped off a little bit as we've got busier building sites, but absolutely something that we want to do moving forward to get the best solutions.
I guess probably adding to, some of your question particularly is that, as we move forward through, this sustainability and green energy, it's going to raise new challenges, and new opportunities to try and deal with, additional waste and, all those sorts of things. And, trying to bring everybody along on the journey, I think is hard, especially when you're probably introducing new technology that's not proven, that's not tried, that, it does raise red flags and, high risk questions, and I guess, that collaboration piece is going to be super important in terms of, how do we make sure that those new businesses, those new emerging businesses that are going to help reduce this waste that, we know is going to be there in the next 5 to 10 years without, collapsing those businesses and making it so difficult and so regulatory that the businesses just look and go, no, that's too hard. I think we just need to come up with a solution that, is less risk and, but I don't think that's the answer. And I think building those collaborators and partnering with those people who have that ingenuity and that, those resources available to them, I think is important.
So we need another session on structured enabling of innovation in the precincts. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you for joining us in person and online. And we'll be back next year to talk about our progress. Yeah.